Any given Sunday in week 14, it was either very, very tense or you might have forgotten you had fantasy football. We had kind of the top end going after those buys, going after the rounds, and then we did have it where 7 people were going to be narrowed down to 6 spots. We already know because you can go and look, but let me talk to you a little bit more about how we got there, both for week 14 stuff and then our stuff. When it comes to week 14, it's tricky because I know in NFL sense, the playoff run is really just getting started. And so as the fan of the sport in me, there's certain things I would talk about. For example, we keep talking about Chiefs in media and things like that and how they might technically still be mathematically in, but how Reed's kind of FU fourth down calls are a little bit ridiculous. And we could talk about analytics and how, yeah, sure, maybe it always makes sense to go on fourth down, but it does not factor in things like momentum. And I know you're not supposed to care about that, but at the same time, a fatigued defense and constantly, repeatedly going at them, that does mean something. It also means something when your defense is actually more consistent or reliable than your offense. And I don't know how well that factors out. But even now, I'm probably boring you and you're thinking, I don't care about football. I care about my fantasy team. And in week 14, that's where we're at, where it's really hard to be an NFL fan. You're kind of your own team's fan. And with that being said, I can't help but think of some of the knock-on effects. For example, if it's not a keeper league, most of them aren't, you might never draft Jalen Hurts again if you started him this week and you needed something from him. 2 turnovers in the same play is something you can't forget. And there is a significant chance that he cost people an actual playoff spot or a seeding spot this week. If you're looking at it that way, it's more of the grudges we bear and the things that we carry. Now, we already know now if you made the playoffs or didn't make the playoffs or what seed or spot you had. So it's kind of redundant to look back at week 14. Even when I started looking at some of the statistics I wanted to look at or I would normally talk about, my head is already in the playoffs and what's happening this week. And if they're going to be repeated trends and patterns and what that says about us. For example, right now you have in the past couple weeks, Josh Allen and then Seattle's defense as probably the top 2 scorers consistently amongst all mediums. But what does that mean? Shedeur Sanders, I think, was the second highest starting quarterback. You're going to trust him in your playoff game? Who do you really want to be in your first round playoff game? Even now, speaking to a bunch of people, there's a handful of people that are out and are going to be consolation. There's a couple people that got the bye. So in every league, there's only a handful of people that are actually playing this week. And you might have some of the more difficult decisions to go on. Do you want to go and try and get someone off the waiver wire? Or do you want to play like Justin Jefferson, who's done nothing for you all year, but kind of was your guy in the first round? Significant questions. I think also looking ahead, there's some really interesting matchups football-wise that are going to be huge for this week. Where do you sit on the AFC East? Do you think that most valuable player means the player who has the most value to your team? If so, Josh Allen's probably your guy. Or is it the best player on right now, one of the best teams? That'd be Drake May. And they're going to get after it this week, and it's going to be super entertaining. Do we care about history? You've got Goff and Stafford, and they're going to play each other again. And I mean, it's kind of like we're getting to that age, or I'm at that age, where some people's relationships have worked and some aren't. And when you have those co-parenting situations, like, are we just supposed to pretend that they didn't get traded for each other and like family swapped? And one of them won the Super Bowl or like moved on with an attractive other partner, and the other one is Goff. Is we just pretending he's happy with this? Is this going to be an FU game for him? Or is this going to be the Rams cementing themselves as the best offense? A lot of football questions, a lot of fantasy sports questions. Let's focus on the fantasy sports and get on to our league, though. In a win, and he's in performance, Jim not only won, but he put up the top score of the week, which helps him vault all the way up to 5th. That's going to change the matchups. We'll get to that in a second. How he did so, he trusts J.J. McCarthy. So that's a new suggestion. Turns out it worked. 3 touchdowns. Well done. He also used both of the players he got in that big trade, so obviously it made sense. JSN was the wide receiver 5, and he actually had the running backs 4 and 5, kind of helping to round him out. Now, sadly, he didn't make all the best decisions. Who knew Shedeur Sanders would have been an awesome call? He was the quarterback 2 this week. Do not blame him for not going to that particularly well. That would have been a super gutsy call, even more than the JJ. In terms of House of Gibbs, he was the House of Gibbs and Paca Nacua. That is running back 1 and wide receiver 1, respectively. Unfortunately, he started a quarterback who only had 1 leg. literally with the fracture, and then left with only one Achilles, unfortunately, so he's donezo. As we know, there's been some pickup stuff. We'll talk about that when we get to next week's matchups. That cost him, plus, I mean, Giv3n was actually open and couldn't get the ball, or couldn't have the quarterback get the ball to him, let's say. In his defense, he did make the wrong call there. He had Philly's defense, which was the defense 5. That would have been a little bit better. And who knew Jerry Jeudy would have also been an upgrade as opposed to Justin Jefferson? Didn't see that one coming. Wouldn't have made that call. No worries. You're both in the playoffs, and who knows? Maybe we'll see each other again in a week or two. Another pivotal matchup. Both people were in the playoffs, but this was to decide the bye, which is going to be oh so important this week. Paul, unfortunately, fell shy, and not even just by a little bit. Michael here, you did quite well going over your predicted. Michael Wilson was your guy. He was the wide receiver too. Other than that, you just had a steady stream of performances. Dax, I think, was quarterback 6 or 7, just outside of the top 5, making most of the good calls here. You did have some bye issues, so that's something you were dealing with. Not quite as much as Paul. He lost 2 pretty big guns here, so that is the benefit of putting yourself in the position. You didn't have to win this week, but had you won, you probably would have been a little pumped. Starting a quarterback who got you negative, going to go ahead and say that's not what you were hoping for when you put in Tyrod Taylor. Christian Watson, though, gave you a nice little surprise. That was a wide receiver 4 and the only person on your team that actually cracked the top 5. You did have a pretty disappointing one. I guess better get it all out, but now you are up. You were one of the 4 people who's going to have a matchup this week because of it. Michael, you don't. Take the bye week. Rest him up. The other person who can rest this week, Ernie McCracken. I know you've had an up and a down and an up and a down. You did have a bit of a losing streak, but you came all the way back. You got the number 1 seed, just barely there, but congratulations. That comes with a couple different rewards, one of them being in on for play next week. How you managed? More consistency than actually excellence, but Seattle has been probably your leading scorer in the past 2 to 3 weeks. They were the defense 1, and you did just enough to get by with everybody else. Shockingly, DK's was not a top 5 wide receiver performance. Had a few pretty good wide receiver performances. Not Dobbs, though. He threw out the bagel. Will, you were looking at Miami as the defense 3 as your stud, and obviously your quarterbacks did just fine. All right, enough to get you through. Now, even your bench quarterback was going off. I understand if people don't remember, St. Brown was actually a 50-50, and we are at the weird part where sometimes you have to make a decision before you know. Looking down at the bench, nothing really cost you here. Is worth mentioning on the pine over on this side, Tony Pollard was the running back 2, his best performance of the year so far. You two were battling at the top 2 spots for a while there at the beginning of the league, starting off undefeated. I believe both of you were. Both of you got some losses now, but both of you are still in the playoffs, so could be a lot worse. Speaking of a lot worse, Jake knew he had to win for the chance to be in, but he did need some help, and he didn't get the help he was looking for. So you got the W, even with a bit of an underwhelming performance. You were pretty much your guy all in, Josh Allen. I feel like we're going to say that pretty much every week because it's a keeper league, and I would be shocked if you're not keeping him. Now, surprisingly, with all your bye weeks and your negative defense on the bench, you made pretty much the right calls. Your guys just didn't really go off for you. I think Hampton coming back, starting in week 1 was pretty gutsy. He didn't really have a whole lot of options. He didn't hold you back, but didn't really get any other outstanding performances. Now, it was still better than Joe. Joe, you had the quarterback 5 in Stafford. And then just, again, some people that did okay. You think Denver would have been a top 5 defense, but we did have some high-scoring defenses. They were pretty close and almost tied with Philly. Your bench, same. You were dealing with some bye issues. You did not have a shot at it, though, so maybe you weren't putting your heart behind it. Now, both of you are going to be in the consolation round we'll talk about in just a second. But first, we do have one more matchup to talk about. That matchup, of course, another 2 people in the bottom, so we did have kind of a have and have not. We're going to see each other all again. Now, Benjamin, I have to say, I knew you were out of it. I was kind of hoping, though, you'd still put some people in. Remember, every week it's important to try and be competitive. You've had someone in your IR in there for a little bit and someone on the bye. I'm guessing you're going to tap back in for the consolation round, not this week, but next. I'll try and tell you why in a second if you're not sure. For me, I did okay. Actually, I had quarterback 3 and quarterback 4 and defense 4, and if we look at my bench, I had the running back 3. So for me, that's actually about as good as it's going to get right now. So as you see here, we did have a tie here. But Jake knew he wasn't going to pass, and actually with the outburst, Van Buren would have gotten it anyway. Obviously 160 was what it took to win, but it also is what it took to pass Jake overall, just in case he was worried about points. That is something we can entertain, by the way. I've had some leagues where the sixth person is not actually the sixth. It's the highest scoring person who didn't make it. That would have been Joe in this case, but had there been, sorry, Joe was the top of this particular run. We actually had our top 6 teams make the playoffs, so can't really complain. Speaking of the matchups, though, let's take a quick look at the first round of the playoffs. In the first round, we notice almost everyone has a bye. Of the 10 of us, 6 of us aren't playing, 4 are. The consolation round, if you forget, does actually matter. From here on out, our draft order for next year will be decided by our finishes this year. And it's choice, not designation. So the person who gets number 1 actually chooses if they want 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They pick their spot. And the person that gets to choose is going to be the winner of the consolation side. So the top 4 choices will be here. And then after that, it'll go in order of how you finish. So the 5 and the 6 will be the 2 people this week that lose. One of them will be right here. So 2, we got a middle school matchup here. I think it's going to come down to, I mean, Yahoo says it's all Paul, but I think we know with Nakua and Gibbs, nothing is off the table. Fannin has been having a monster kind of run here. We'll see how she goes. On the flip side, he's got McCaffrey back. He's a little bit more settled. Brock Purdy's back at the helm. If we look at their bench spots, we know the grandpa is on the roster. Apparently that was good enough for a guaranteed win, or we almost thought so until we saw laugh emojis. Mary, you know what, if you guys do Mariota and Rivers and you both sub him in, massive respect. Watson was a top 5 receiver. Paul's currently electing not to go to him, but let's be honest. We don't know what the rosters are going to look like till tip-off. Yes, I did just say tip-off. Basketball's on the brain. Sorry, guys. Can't buck coaching. We had a pretty close predicted, and then we had a Thursday night game, which V was all about having his number 1 guy go off. We don't know what that's going to finish with yet, but I would be shocked if this is one where both maybe look to go over projected. We got a lot of people here with a lot of firepower. Looks like decent receiving cores. I don't know if it's going to come down, but both have favorable defensive matchups. Looking at the bench, there might be some people moving in and out. Maybe Shedeur Sanders earned his spot in Jim's mind over Drake May and JJ McCarthy. I'd say May is probably in there. McCarthy, I mean, who knows? You roll with them. Maybe you go in the Dallas matchup. Only time will tell. Either way, folks, playoff time. Playoffs are set, and the weird thing about fantasy sports, you're all gung-ho week 15, and 4 of the 6 of us are actually in it. So while some of our teams can take a rest and recover, do remember bottom 4, it is going to matter. Top 2, obviously you're already in the semis. 4 teams fighting for 2 more spots. Good luck to everyone.